Good evening, everybody. This is the Passball Show for the 22nd day of January 2018. This show that focuses on baseball, sports, and unifying America. Obviously, a lot of stuff to get into in regards to the NFL championship weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about some potential trades that never, ever will happen in regards to professional sports. But if you listen to fan bases and maybe people that are a little too biased in their opinion, we have a day and age where you could be a diehard fan of a team and get a job as a writer somewhere. And I tell you, we talk about conflict of interest, how it exists in the world of journalism. Now, listen, I'm not saying that if you have an aspiration or a desire to want to be a writer, you can't be a diehard fan of a certain team. But when you take it a step further and you use that biasness that you have in your reporting, it kind of waters down your product. And we're going to touch on that in a little bit. We're going to be joined by the head scout of the Rockland Boulders. But we're going to start by talking some NFL football playoff weekend. But the issue that I have, and I'm not going to get into it, I'm not going to be one of the mainstream radio hosts where we're going to sit here and preview the Super Bowl for 2 weeks. There's a couple things that interest me the most in regards to what we saw this weekend, and they had to do with the two teams that ended up losing, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Minnesota Vikings. The Jacksonville Jaguars actually went at the New England Patriots and probably played one of their best games. Their game plan seemed to be solid. It seemed like from an execution standpoint, the Jaguars played pretty well. And they put themselves in a very good position where legitimately they could have won that game. Now, what did they run into? Well, they ran into Tom Brady. And what seems to happen in the second half and the fourth quarter of these big games, you seem to need to have to come up with a different type of game plan, a game plan that you haven't really seen anybody go at the New England Patriots with. Now, you could say, arguably, the New York Giants in the two Super Bowls, the big difference in their performance as opposed to the other teams that we're seeing get knocked off by the Patriots, playoff game in and playoff game out, was what the Giants were able to do and how they played Tom Brady and the Patriots in the fourth quarter of the particular game. And obviously we're talking about the two Super Bowls here. The Jaguars for 3 quarters hung in there and were just as good as the New England Patriots. Blake Bortles needed to do one thing, and that was not turn the ball over. That was play the game consistently enough where he was able to move the Jaguars down the field. And the one thing that stood out to me, that if I was the New England Patriots, I would have been the most fearful of, was the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars managed the clock, for the exception of a few instances that I didn't like. I didn't like them taking a knee at the end of the first half. There was a couple different times where you could say clock management was a little bit of an issue, but from an offensive standpoint, they were able to control the time of possession. And that's one thing that you want to do when you're playing the Patriots. You want to keep their defense on the field because you know at some point their defense can become a weakness. Now, I think over the course of the last several years, one of the more underrated thing has been the performance of the New England Patriots defense. They've played better than they've gotten credit for. They've been able to make stops. They've been able to keep teams from putting points on the board, and that has allowed for Tom Brady and the offense to do their job. I think for 3 quarters of this game, you can make a case that the Jacksonville Jaguars were the better team. What seems to happen in the fourth quarter, and you've seen it week in and week out, if you're watching the game against the Titans 2 weeks ago, it started a little bit earlier. You could just tell right by the end of the first quarter that the Tennessee Titans didn't belong on the same field as the New England Patriots. But you essentially saw 2 completely different games if you watch the first 3 quarters and then you watch the fourth quarter. And it was kind of reminiscent of what we saw in the Super Bowl last year when the Patriots looked like they were getting blown out by the Atlanta Falcons. And all of a sudden, it was a different game, the end of the third quarter going into the fourth quarter. And it almost seems like if you're going to beat the Patriots in any one of these games, you have to come up with a specific game plan to stop the Patriots in the fourth quarter. And I haven't seen it happen. You saw that happen in the 2 Super Bowls against the Giants, where the Giants were able to make stops. They were able to play some sort of ball control offense where they controlled the time of possession, and it allowed them in the end to come up on top. But what you saw with the Jaguars is it was almost like the Patriots allowed for the Jaguars to give an impression, maybe a psychological advantage where they felt like they were the better team. And coming into that fourth quarter, it was like the Patriots unleashed a different style, something that the Jaguars were not used to. And all of a sudden, you could say some of it had to do with the tiring defense, and I agree with that. But just the way the Patriots were able to move the ball in the fourth quarter, it was something that essentially it was just unstoppable. And it was a mirror image of what we saw in the fourth quarter, at the end of the third quarter of the Super Bowl that we just saw when the Patriots came back against the Atlanta Falcons. I'll tell you, once the Patriots started building up some momentum, and even when they were trailing, before they got that last touchdown that put them ahead, there was very little doubt that the Patriots were putting the ball in the end zone that one last time. And the question was going to be if there was any chance that the Jaguars could do something that they really haven't done. Now, I give them credit for the way they beat up the Pittsburgh Steelers and ended up coming out ahead, but their defense didn't come up very big in that game. I know they were able to, make it to where they scored last, and they ended up outlasting the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the defense specifically against the Patriots in this past game ended up coming out a little bit short. But I do give the Jaguars credit because I think from their standpoint, they're building towards something. I think they could be considered a team that could compete with the likes of the Patriots going forward. The question is going to be, is Blake Bortles going to be the quarterback? Did he do enough in these 2 playoff games when they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers and when they pretty much beat the New England Patriots for 3 quarters to build enough trust in that Jacksonville organization that they think they could go with Bortles going forward? I think it's going to be a tough ask. I don't know if I'd really be willing to trust Blake Bortles as my quarterback when, from this team's perspective, the Jaguars' perspective, they are close enough. They have a defense that is strong enough that I think they can compete with most teams in the AFC. And yes, they fell a little short against the Patriots, and in the end, it's going to be judged whether they won or lost the game. I get it. But I still think this team is a quarterback away. And if they can use the NFL's free agency, which, by the way, is going to free up a ton of quarterbacks, probably some quarterbacks that we're not even thinking about now. You could start with Kirk Cousins. You could start with Eli Manning. But I bet you there's going to be other teams that may be freeing up their quarterbacks based off of who they choose to draft in this coming draft. You're going to look at about 4, 5, maybe even 6 legitimate NFL caliber starting quarterbacks that are going to come out of this draft. Now, obviously, they got to earn it. Not everybody with a high draft pick, a first-round draft pick. I could think of, Achilles Smith, Ryan Leaf. The list goes on in regards to quarterbacks that have been drafted, very high in first rounds. Tim Couch, Vince Young even. I mean, look at how great everybody thought Vince Young was going to be. I thought he was going to be the Tennessee Titans quarterback of the future. He's out of the league right now. So a lot of teams are going to be willing to take chances. And with those chances is going to be opportunity for starting quarterbacks in the National Football League to maybe get a fresh start. And you could look at the potential list based off of what teams end up drafting a quarterback, and it's going to free up a lot of quality NFL arms, a lot of quality NFL quarterbacks that have proven they could do it before. A team like Jacksonville would be foolish if they didn't choose to upgrade. Now, going on the other side, looking at the NFC game. And listen, there's going to be way too much discussion, way too much attention put to the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'll let all the top, media outlets cover it to nauseum. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to break down every little thing that you could think of. And by the time, 2 weeks from yesterday comes by, you're going to be so tired of hearing about the Patriots and hearing about the Eagles. But I'll tell you, the Minnesota Vikings, and this is a story that's not going to be discussed enough on the way that they ended up winning that last game against the New Orleans Saints. Put them in a position where they almost didn't belong there. It took the miracle of all miracle plays to get them into the NFC Championship game. And a team that a lot of experts would say may have the most talent, may have been the most feared team. But they almost, and very well should have, got knocked off at home against the New Orleans Saints. So the one part of this that kind of bothers me is this feeling that exists of momentum. And if you ask anybody that's played any professional sport, any professional team sport, they tell you what they think about momentum. Every new game creates a new opportunity for every team that's playing. And if you feel you could have won the last 10 games, you could have dominated the last 10 games. But if you don't put your best effort on the field, on a given day that we're talking about, the given game that's being played, there's no such thing as momentum. It doesn't carry over from game to game. You know where it carries over from? This carryover that we're talking about in regards to momentum? Fan bases feel it. The media feels it. But when it comes down to the players, you still have to go out there and perform. And I question, in regards to this particular game, whether the Minnesota Vikings were trying to ride maybe too much off of the momentum and making this out to be destiny. This was our destiny. We were determined to win the Super Bowl. We were determined to get to the Super Bowl where it's being played in our own home stadium. I think there's too much that's been built up off of that. And I'm very curious to see. And I know you could ask the players, you could ask the coaches. Nobody's ever going to say this. But I wonder how much in regards to that outside aspect of the team of destiny, how much the thought of how great it would be to play the Super Bowl in your home stadium. I wonder how much that became a psychological disadvantage for the Minnesota Vikings. And I tell you, if you look at it from that angle, all you have to see to back up the point that I'm making is the results on the field. This team came out there and gave you very little to nothing. You weren't very far into the second quarter where you felt like this game was decided. Now, I think the Philadelphia Eagles deserve credit. Nick Foles played the game of his life. And go back to what I was saying earlier, he may have played himself into a job as a starting quarterback for some team in the NFL. Now, you think the Jaguars are looking at Nick Foles' performance saying, wow, you know what? If we had him on our team and he performed the way he did against the New England Patriots, they'd be going to the Super Bowl. So you're looking at one team in Jacksonville that I think played outstanding, put themselves in the best position that they could to win. Yes, they got a little tired at the end, and maybe the lack of game planning of how to find some way to stop Tom Brady when he's got that momentum going in the fourth quarter. But I tell you, they got every reason to hang their heads up high. And the Jacksonville Jaguars certainly should. Minnesota Vikings, on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say in regards to this thought of being the team of destiny. I understand they came right off the heels of one of the most incredible finishes and victories in the history of professional sports. I mean, outside of throwing a Hail Mary, there is very few other scenarios that you could come up with that can describe something that would happen in such an unfathomable fashion. the way they were able to score that touchdown, and obviously all the things needed to go right for him, not only to make the catch, not only to save time on the clock, but score. And you also needed the New Orleans Saints to, I don't know what the heck they were doing. I still don't understand how a guy could catch that ball, and yes, the safety missed. We understand that. That was talked at for nauseum this week. How do you got 10 other guys on the field that aren't anywhere near him as he's running down the sideline? But the Vikings, hopefully they learn a lesson based off of what happened yesterday, because it didn't seem like they were ready to play. I think they were sitting there with their pixie dust, waiting for those little fairies to kind of drag them through into the Super Bowl. It's almost like they didn't feel like they needed to play the game. They felt like because they won the previous week in a fashion that they did, that God was going to lift them up and propel them into the Super Bowl, and they didn't need to do anything to earn it. The Philadelphia Eagles came into that game like they were the ones that knew what they needed to do. They knew they had to play their best game. They game planned to a point that they needed to know that everything needed to work right. And it did. From a game plan standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, all the positives go towards the Eagles. Because they look like the team that they wanted that game. The Minnesota Vikings literally looked like they felt like they were destined to do that. It was almost like an entitlement for them. Because of the way they won that previous game, they were going to be dragged in to the Super Bowl. Was it strictly because it was played at their home stadium? Maybe they got too psyched up and caught up in this whole destiny thing, and they forgot to play the football game. And once again, we could talk about the thought of momentum, of how it applies to professional sports, but anybody that's played knows that's a crock of you-know-what. You build your own momentum, but you build it during the game that you're playing. You can talk about how momentum swings in an individual game, but it never carries over from the previous game. And we're talking about in football, we're talking about playing a completely different team. You don't think the Eagles were pretty high off of the win that they had the week before? They beat an Atlanta team that, they were the underdog at home. The same thing was happening against Minnesota. And it's almost like the performance that you saw from the Minnesota Vikings was they didn't expect there to be another team that wanted to win. Should the NFL have just given them the game because they won the previous game in the way that they did? I don't get it. And listen, you want your Super Bowl previews, go somewhere else. Because I'm not going to waste my time previewing this game, at least until we get into next week. I mean, the fact that the NFL has set the Super Bowl up to be 2 weeks from the championship game doesn't do very much. Kevin Tuve is the head scout for the Rockland Boulders, and he joins the program right now. What's going on, Kevin?
John, it's a pleasure. Not too much, just doing the off-season thing and getting ready, hoping the warm weather and spring training gets here before you know it, John.
Hey, you know what? Next thing you know, it will be here. And as I was just talking a little bit of football, and obviously we go from the cold weather, and it's kind of a transition. As you go from the championship game to the Super Bowl, you have that little gap where it doesn't seem to be like there's a lot of things going on. All of a sudden, you got March Madness, and next thing you know, we're gonna be in baseball season. And I'll tell you, what a baseball fan like myself and you probably enjoy the most is the season seems to last a long time.
It really does. It's tough getting there, but once you get there, there's just a lot. I mean, it's night after night of something going on somewhere. There's always games, and it's just a chore really getting through. The late fall and dog days of winter, as I call it, when you get to January and February, and then you're there. There's grapefruit, Cactus League baseball in March, right around spring training, you know?
Yeah, no question about it, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. First question I got to ask you in regards to scouting. There's a lot of emphasis being put on analytics now, and it seems to have come at the expense of scouting. How would you say the use of analytics in sports has impacted your job as a scout?
You know, it's funny you say that because that's exactly what's happening, and you know, I'm more old school where I'm still, you know, we're still looking for guys that can compete at that independent level with, you know, AA and AAA guys, and even some big leaguers too in the Can-Am and these different leagues. You know, but at the same time, analytics really has changed because now people are looking at numbers and they're not sending scouts. And I totally disagree with that, but that's the way that, you know, the game has went. And listen, a lot of scouts, John, and the people out there, you know, a lot of the scouts have not retained jobs because they're looking at analytics and they're looking for, you know, the studious kids to come in and talk about these different, you know, statistics instead of sending someone out to see a player perform. So, you know, you're 100% right. That's the way the game has went, you know.
Now, I tell you, the thing that frustrates me about it, I mean, I understand it. I understand where you do need to study some numbers, and having a couple people that specialize it obviously is beneficial to any baseball organization. But it almost seems like there's a wall that's been drawn up. And you see, just based off of the reaction and the way, like a lot of people that are studying analytics, and they're looking at it as the only way. And I tell you, to build a successful baseball team, you really do need a combination of everything. You need some, you know, eye test. You need some people that are willing to, you know, project based off of what they see in addition to numbers. And I'm having a hard time understanding why it just seems like there's such a divide. Like, I would think that everybody would want to embrace each other. And instead, it's almost like one side against the other.
Right. Well, you know, the big thing is what's happening now is, you know, more and more organizations are leaning that way, which is definitely kind of a shame. I mean, you know, gone are the days of the guys that are showing up at these, you know, amateur tournaments in high school and college. You know, what they're doing is they're looking at stats. I mean, you hit it on the head, and you know, to be honest, I mean, I think communication in the organization is the biggest thing, and I see it lacking. You know, I have experience working the Seattle Mariners organization, scouting-wise on the East Coast here in 2012. You know, the spring of 12 before I came to the Rockland Boulders. And, you know, one of the things I always was told by a lot of older scouts was it's like, you know, people are covering territory and they're kind of fighting over who's going to cover what territory. But you almost welcome that nowadays because now it's turned into an analytical game and everybody's looking at printouts. And, you know, you saw that with the Joe Girardis and the Buck Showalters. It's definitely on the big league level now, and that's what the GMs are looking for, you know?
No, absolutely. And I'll tell you, from your perspective, have you noticed the difference in your job responsibilities, or has it stayed the same over the last several years?
You know what, John? It hasn't really spread too much to the independent realm yet. You know, we have had a lot of inquiries over the past, 4 or 5 years of younger people that are saying, hey, I can come there and do this, this, and this. You know, at this level, you have to have it already as far as the talent goes to play because, like I said, you're playing in this league. It's 100 games regular season, and you're playing guys, you know, that are in anywhere from high A to Triple A and even some of the big leagues. So it will spread to this. Has it yet? Not really. We've kept it kind of, you know, in quotes, kind of old school when it comes to, you know, the scouting wise. We do a lot of invite workouts in Rockland where we bring guys from all over the country in, we're really the only independent team that I know that does, you know, 3 major invite workouts throughout the season. I mean, that's my job to make that happen. So it's kind of neat, but I have a little scouting staff, but you know, you make a great point. I mean, analytics are going to spread to independent baseball. It's a matter of time. It really is. Now,
of course it is. And once again, I'm joined by the head scout of Rockland Boulders, Kevin Tuve. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is the basically what you are doing, because I think what you're doing in regards to independent baseball is a great opportunity for players that are either on their way out or just haven't gotten the proper opportunity, whether they're playing in the minor leagues in Major League Baseball, or they've had a certain run up to a certain level, and all of a sudden it's been cut off. Two things I want to get into. You look at the amount of different levels that your average player, from once they're drafted, to go through rookie ball, to go to low A, high A, double A, and triple A. And it's a very long weaning out process. And during that process, a lot of very good and talented players end up having their careers, at least at the professional level, end. Talk a little bit about your role in regards to helping these players continue their careers.
Yeah, it's a great point you just made, John. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. So we're taking a look. Number one, we're taking a look at when spring training rolls around. Right around. I'd say somewhere around March 10th to the 20th. In there, you're getting the better players that are getting released because it's later in spring training. Teams are going to make their final roster cuts for the minor league or clubs. Right around St. Patrick's Day, a little bit later. So those are the players that we're looking at. Number one, the better players we're looking at potentially targeting to sign, go through their agents and sign them to a contract. When it comes to the younger guys, then we're looking for invite workouts. We can bring them to New York to work out for the Boulders, in May in spring training. So we're reaching out. I pretty much get the team emails forwarded over to me, and I'm getting texts. I mean, the other day I was having dinner and somebody called me from somewhere in Texas that I'd never heard of, which is the best part about the job. And this person called and said, "Hey, you know what? I'm looking for a workout. What's going on?" And so then there you go. So you never know where it's going to come from, and we're giving guys an opportunity to come here and work out on an invite level, with the Boulders, and then if it works, we've had it happen where guys are coming, and the guy flew in from Utah one year with experience with the Milwaukee Brewers, and he told me he had a one-way ticket, and he ended up making the team. He was right on, and he came and was with us till July, and he ended up getting hurt and had to shut it down, his shoulder. But we are looking to give guys another chance, and we've had somewhere about 20 guys, John, signed to affiliated contracts since 2013.
It's outstanding.
Including right now, Jared Martin is in big league camp with the Oakland A's starting in March, and Steven Cardullo, who played parts of 2 seasons with the Rockies, is now in AAA, in the big leagues. But we do have affiliated kids scattered around the country, so we're trying, John. We are pumping them in there. So.
Hey, last thing before I let you go, there could be somebody listening that's looking for an opportunity. A little bit about when tryouts are.
Excellent. So May 5th is the open tryout. That's the first one. They can go to the rocklandboulders.com. My email, I'm going to give it on the air. It is on the website. It's Kevin Tuve. That's KevinTuve as in Victor, ETUVE @yahoo.com. And it is on the Rockland Boulders website. May 5th is the one we're working on right now, the open tryout. We'd love to get guys out. And, my phone number's even on the website and my email. And John, I really appreciate it. And, anytime you want to talk baseball, I'd love to be a part of it. I really appreciate the time tonight. And it's been fun. I really enjoy this kind of thing.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kevin. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely be in touch soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Have a good evening, John. Thanks again.
Hey, no problem. That's Kevin Tuve, the head scout of the Rockland Boulders. And I'll tell you one of the things, and I'll make a quick point about this. The independent baseball has really saved a lot of lives in regards to players who really, end up phasing out at some point. And the one thing that I've stressed all along, and having the opportunity to speak with a lot of players that, either made it all the way to the major leagues, and maybe their time in the major leagues was not long, or players that made it up through rookie ball or high A or, double A, triple A, and ended up having their careers end. And it's not like all of a sudden they stop and they don't have the ability to play anymore. You think about it from the lowest level. Somebody could be playing high school baseball, and they could be the best player on their team and one of the best in the entire league. Could move on to college and have the same thing, can dominate through college. But once they get to college, they're playing against everybody who is the best player on their own team. And then as they move into the pros, whether they're drafted or end up coming as a free agent, they're playing against the best of all colleges and the best of all high schools. And then they get to the next level. It's the best of the best. And, it's a tough process because, all of a sudden you're not the best anymore. And you have to prove yourself at another level. And that's what makes baseball, in order to go from being a kid, whether you're playing, competitively at any level, to make it to the, professional ranks, to make it all the way to the major leagues, it's a little bit tougher to do in baseball than it is in football and basketball. And of course, in the end, talent will prevail. If you're the best of the best, yeah, I think in more cases than not, as we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show. And that cuckoo clock means the reintroduction. This is John Pielli. I'm happy to be with you guys. We're trying Facebook Live on my personal page as opposed to the show page. So I do want to remind anybody that's listening, you like the content, you want to give me another try, check out Pass Ball Show, which you can hear every Monday through Friday. Today we're doing 9 to 10. We'll be with you tomorrow and Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. So we tend to fluctuate the time. And I got to be honest, I'm experimenting in regards to what's the best time to get the most people interactive. And just a reminder, if you want to call into the program, you can be part of it. It's 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. So just finishing up this little thing in regards to baseball, the fact that the players that get to the major leagues have to be the best of the best, or they have to at least be competitive enough where they progress in the minor leagues. And you see so many instances where very good players that end up going to major league spring training, that could compete on that level. They could hit a 97-mile-an-hour fastball 420 feet. They could even hit a curveball. Pitchers that could strike out, major league all-stars in spring training, but end up never getting into major leagues. And independent baseball was created years and years ago to not just give a little bit of an outlet for the player that doesn't make it to the majors, but to give them another opportunity. And you've seen in many different cases, players that have played independent baseball, they end up getting another opportunity in the major leagues, and in some cases they end up sticking. So great job by Kevin Tuve, who of course is the head scout of the Rockland Boulders, as we continue to move on the program. Started the show today talking a little NFL, and I'll tell you the thing that stood out to me the most, and I'll be real quick on this as I spoke about it for the better part of the first 20 minutes of the show. The Minnesota Vikings may have psychologically thought of themselves as a team of destiny. And I know from an effort standpoint, everybody will tell you that they tried. They played the best game that they could. They tried to win. But I think they felt a little bit of a sense of entitlement. They felt like they were deserved of an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, partially because of the way that they won the game against the New Orleans Saints, but also because of the fact that the game was being played in their home stadium in Minnesota. So I don't think the Minnesota Vikings were prepared. Yes, there has to be some blame on Mike Zimmer. There has to be blame on Pat Shurmur, who, by the way, is going to be introduced this week as the next head football coach of the New York Giants. Both of those guys have to take that as a knock against them. And I would say everybody that's responsible, from the coaching staff to the leaders, the veteran players on that team, they all did a bad job because that team was not ready to play football this past Sunday. I give the Eagles credit. Yes, they played a great game. They earned the right to go to the Super Bowl. Nick Foles played the game of his life. But I tell you, the Minnesota Vikings did a lousy job. And I wonder how much of it needs to be put towards the fact that they were not prepared. They felt like they were getting an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl because the game was being played in their own stadium, and the fact that they won the game in the most miraculous fashion against the New Orleans Saints a week earlier. Once again, John Pielli, 732-364-3598. Throw the phone number out there one more time. Another thing I do want to bring up, and I kind of teased it in my open. You talk about people that get the opportunity to get jobs as writers. And, the media, the way the landscape is set up in the world of sports now, there's so many different outlets. You could get your news, your stories, pretty much anywhere that you want. But that's obviously helped in the job market in regards to writers. You could have aspirations as a young kid and you say, hey, you know what? I want to be a writer. You can join many different that exist in the world of minor league sports. You could get jobs working for certain blogs. There's a lot of unpaid jobs that are out there that allow people to build up experience. But the problem that I have is when you make a decision to be a writer, and this is something that you're passionate about, and this is something that you want to do, this is something that you want to devote your future towards, you have to make a decision in regards to your interest as a fan. And I'm not saying that you can't be a fan of a sports team, and I'll use the New York Yankees as an example. You can grow up as a diehard fan of the New York Yankees. You could watch every game at the tip of your seat, waiting for the action. Can't wait to see your team win, and when you do, celebrate like there's no other. But you have to draw a line between your interest as a writer and the professionalism that has to be behind it. And what's happening now is you have people that happen to be fans of a sports team and they're writing, covering their favorite sports team, but they're letting the biasness of their fans impact the stories that they're writing. The first scenario I'm going to point out is a potential trade that the Boston Celtics can make in basketball. Anthony Davis is a very sought-after player, the absolute star of his own team. And obviously, if the Boston Celtics could somehow land this player, they would put themselves in a great position. The Celtics with Anthony Davis, I think, would be absolutely on the same level as the Golden State Warriors. But the logic of that would be the fact that it would take them an awful lot to be able to land this player. He's not going to be given up for nothing. And unfortunately, if you're a writer and you support the Boston Celtics, you grew up as a Boston Celtics fan, maybe you watched Larry Bird, maybe you saw some of the most recent, but you have to look at it from the other perspective, which in this case is the New Orleans Pelicans. They have a right to put the most competitive team that they can on the field or on the court. And they also have the right, if they're willing to trade a player like Anthony Davis, to expect way more than anybody would like for another player that's going to be traded at the NBA trading deadline. So the coach of the New Orleans Pelicans and that's Alan Gentry, a longtime NBA assistant. He's had a couple coaching jobs in the NBA. Basically says, hey, if I'm going to trade Anthony Davis, I want the New England Patriots, and then I want more than that. And the bottom line is a certain precedent has to be set if you're going to trade a player like that. The problem is, and this happens all the time, and I dispute and argue with fans all the time, in regards to what you would think would be a proper trade in regards to what you're going to give up to get a star player. The fact that somebody is willing to trade a star player doesn't mean that they're desperately trying to get rid of them. There are some, exceptions. You look at the Miami Marlins and Giancarlo Stanton and the way that worked out to benefit the New York Yankees. Giancarlo Stanton had the right, because he was under contract, because he had a no-trade clause, to essentially approve any trade that he was going to be involved in. He decided he wasn't interested in the St. Louis Cardinals, though the Cardinals could have given the Marlins a better package. The same thing with the San Francisco Giants. So this is the exception to the rule, where you have a star player, an MVP, a guy who hit 59 home runs last year, not essentially getting to pick where he's going, but the price in regards to what the Yankees had to pay in regards to players was not that big. That's not your average trade. That's not your average trade involving a star player. So anybody that wants to make a deal for Anthony Davis has to understand that they're going to have to give up something that's more than a first-round draft pick, more than a young player that you're not using too much on your own team. You know, if I'm thinking Boston Celtics, I'm thinking Jason Tatum. You're going to be starting to trade with him, throw in a first-round draft pick, and then go from there. And that still might not be enough to land Anthony Davis. And then you have to ask yourself, if you're the Boston Celtics, do you want to pay the price it's going to cost to get the player that you want? Because you're not just getting an extra player that the team that the player belongs to doesn't want. So I read something, and every now and then I get kind of sucked into an article. And I do a lot of reading because, you know, I continue to want to grow my mind. I also like to see different perspectives of where a writer is coming from. And I read a story that a writer that was working for, I don't know, a blog for the New York Yankees was coming up with a proposal in regards to trading for Chris Archer of the Tampa Bay Rays. And this intrigued me because I was thinking about it from two angles. One, I just talked about, all right, where's this writer coming from? And is he going to be interested enough from his perspective to acquire the player that he's willing to pay the price that it's going to cost to get Chris Archer from the Tampa Bay Rays? First things first, the Tampa Bay Rays are in the American League East. And if you're a Yankees fan and you're upset because the Yankees couldn't strike a deal with the Baltimore Orioles for Manny Machado, the main reason that didn't happen is Orioles owner Peter Angelos is going to be dead set against trading within a division and certainly trading with the Yankees. And I think the same problem exists in regards to the Tampa Bay Rays. You could question where the Tampa Bay Rays are going as a franchise. Are they going through a rebuilding phase? They did trade Evan Longoria. They look like they're in a spot where they're looking to save money. They're looking to develop younger players. They may be looking to take a dump in regards to 2018 and maybe not take that season seriously. Maybe give the best of what they can give. And if they end up winning a couple more games than they expected, good. I mean, Alex Cobb is a pitcher that's going to be pretty sought after still. I know he hasn't signed yet, but he's going to sign a lucrative deal with another team. It's certainly not going to be with the Tampa Bay Rays. So does that mean that the entire team is for sale? You have to look at the individual player here. Chris Archer has a very team-friendly contract over the next several years. And you could say he's arguably one of the best pitchers in that entire division. Is he Chris Sale? No, probably not. But if he joined the Yankees, you can make a very good case he would be the Yankees' number one pitcher. Now the question would be, all right, how is Luis Severino going to develop? Is he going to take the next step and be the Yankees' absolute ace? Yes, I'll take that into account. But if he's not the number one pitcher for the Yankees, Chris Archer would certainly be the number two, and he would be number two without a doubt. He is better than Masahiro Tanaka. He is better than Sonny Gray. And like I said, you can make a very good case that he is better than Luis Severino. Now, the question with Severino is how much does he project? How much better does he get at age 23, 24, going into 25? You know, does he become an absolute number one? If he does, then yes, he's the best pitcher. But Chris Archer, if he joined the Yankees right now, would probably be their ace, or at least the 1A. So if you're thinking about it from a trade standpoint, who would you be thinking about getting back if you're the Tampa Bay Rays? And I know Yankees fans love to yell, no way. There's no way we're ever trading Gleyber Torres. I think if you're looking for a pitcher that has the potential to even be better, like a Chris Archer, and you would say how much better Chris Archer would make you as a team if you acquired him, I would say definitely Gleyber Torres. But if not, we're looking at a package that starts with Clint Frazier and Justice Sheffield. And I know Yankees fans are getting having this love fest in regards to collecting prospects. But these same fans need to be told that in order to make a good deal, you have to do something that benefits the other team. And the fact that a writer, and I understand, we're talking about writers that have issues in regards to their fandom. They have to be willing to give if they're receiving. And I think the fact that the media in general, talk about sports, don't talk about sports, is so watered down in regards to bringing people in that are taking jobs but have almost a conflict of interest in regards to their beliefs or their biasness. If you're too one-sided, it should be a knock against your ability to report. If you're not going to see the glass from the other side, if you're not going to have an objective enough opinion in regards to a certain topic that you're covering, whether it's sports, whether it's politics, whether it's anybody or anything, you have to question whether or not you should be a reporter. The problem is media outlets all over the place are letting reporters in left and right. And maybe it's the quality of their writing. Maybe it's because they mastered, the ability to, use the Oxford comma. Or put, a period after ST in St. Louis. Maybe they've mastered the writing aspect and they're trusted as writers to be able to produce whatever it is that they want. But when we're talking about writers now, it is very important. And I hope it's somewhere along the lines, media outlets that are hiring writers start to take this into account a little bit more. Because they're not. They're hiring writers that, yes, have the ability to write, have, perfect grammar in regards to what they're producing. But their stories are being skewed because of their own biasness that they have when they're writing a story. And I tell you, you look at any of the old-time writers, especially the ones that are no longer with us, they'd be rolling around in their graves right now if they see the stories that are being put out there. And say how a New York Yankees fan could work for a blog or a media outlet and write stories that are so pro-Yankees. Yes, they're going to get clicks. The Yankee fans are going to love what they say. Oh, wow, we could get Chris Archer and not give up any of our top 10 prospects. It's giving them a false sense of reality. And this is what's becoming a problem in the media as we look at it in this country today. People are writing too much of a wishful thinking story. It doesn't have any backbone to it. And as I was talking about last week, we have stories that are based more off of opinion than they are facts. And I tell you, that's not good. When you're reporting the news, you're supposed to be backing up facts with sources. And anybody that has had any sort of experience in the world, if you've graduated high school, if you've graduated college, you are held to the same set of standards in regards to producing papers and projects and reports. If you don't cite every single one of the sources you use to put anything together, you're not getting an A on that project. And in some cases, you might even get expelled. So how come in the media, people that are getting paid and compensated to write stories are not being held to the same standards that people in high school and college were held to? The whole anonymous sources. You could have anybody tell you whatever they want and hide their name. What? To protect the person that's saying it? How unprofessional is that? How are you going to take a story that somebody is telling you? Or actually, how are you going to tell the story to somebody and say, hey, I'll tell you this if you don't put my name behind it? What does that even mean? It's creating a false sense of reality, and it's spreading on into the recruitment of writers that are starting to write for major outlets across this country. But I think, that person that is writing the biased story, or that person that is one-sided in regards to what they're trying to report, ends up making their own bed over time. Unfortunately, it's taken a longer time for that to happen. They may get that click, or that 1,000 clicks, or that 1,000,000 clicks the first time they write a story. But that story still has to have some substance to it. And Mark Carrig, when he was on the program with me a couple weeks ago, made a great point. You could write a story based off of an anonymous source, but you better make sure that that story is proven to be true. He broke the news of Anthony Swarzak signing with the Mets. He said that, he spoke to somebody close to the situation that told him it was going to happen. You know how he backed up that story? When Anthony Swarzak signed a deal with the New York Mets. You build up credibility by the stories that you write, and having them be fact-based and having them proven to be true. And the last thing I'm going to touch on this is a story that came out last night. Jerry Krashnick, very well-respected ESPN writer, was on the Passball show a couple of years ago, reports that the Milwaukee Brewers are close to making a trade. Now, there's another New York Yankee-centric blog or paper that gets a hold of this story, and they start to put a spin on it to say that this trade that the Milwaukee Brewers are potentially going to make involves Jacoby Ellsbury. And you know who else ends up getting a hold of it? Our good friends at Barstool Sports. And Barstool Sports, from an entertainment standpoint, is doing a good job. I told you, I like what they stand for. I like the fact that they are willing to be a little more over the top, a little more off the cuff in their reporting. But I'll tell you, when it comes to facts and breaking stories, Barstool Sports sucks. This is the same entity that decided to report a story that Adrian Gonzalez was on a family vacation before Game 7 of the World Series. He's away in Italy while there's the World Series game going on. You know how that story was proven to be false? Because there's a post-game show in Los Angeles that Adrian Gonzalez was happened to be on. Hopefully somebody got fired for that story. And you got the guy from Barstool Sports that's breaking news. Yu Darvish is signing with the Cubs. You know who retracts the story? Yu Darvish himself in a tweet. So you got these same clowns that are right now about to report a story that, yes, Jerry Krashnick said that the Brewers are close to a trade. They take that information and say it's going to involve Jacoby Ellsbury going to the Brewers. You want me to build up a little more respect for Barstool Sports? Have that happen. Have that be the trade that Jerry Krashnick was talking about. Which, by the way, the Brewers have a ton of outfielders. Keon Broxton, Lewis Brinson, Ryan Braun, Domingo Santana. They already got 4 outfielders for 3 spots. And they're going to acquire Jacoby Ellsbury? Why? Because some clown Yankee fan can't wait to see his contract being taken off the Yankees roster? Come on. And I'll tell you, if this, once again, Barstool Sports is putting their name on this, they're reporting that Jacoby Ellsbury and his contract are going to the Milwaukee Brewers, who, by the way, Jacoby Ellsbury is an outfielder, and the Brewers have 4 starting outfielders right now. So, yeah, they're going to take not only Jacoby Ellsbury when they don't need an outfielder, but they're going to take his ridiculous contract, too. Nice job, Barstool Sports. Tell you, they're innovative in a couple ways because they're off the cuff and they're not afraid to say what other people are thinking. But their reporting is absolute garbage. And you want to see some credibility built up for them? You could start with Jacoby Ellsbury joining the Milwaukee Brewers and his contract when the Brewers already have 4 outfielders. It'll start with that. And you can talk about David Stearns, the general manager of the Brewers, explaining why he decided to pick up Jacoby Ellsbury in his enormous contract instead of addressing the Brewers pitching staff, which, by the way, they need to. And if you talk to some real reporters, they're talking about the Brewers' interest in Yu Darvish, the Brewers' prior interest with Jake Arrieta, and the Milwaukee Brewers, who showed a lot of promise last year, competed with the Cubs, and were leading the National League Central for a significant amount of time in 2017. If they want to jump back in a race, they need to add a starting pitcher. Not a potentially washed-up outfielder for the New York Yankees on a bad contract for the simple reason of saving the Yankees money. Once again, certain group of people feel like the entire Major League Baseball works for the New York Yankees. This isn't the late 1950s and early 60s Philadelphia Athletics or Kansas City Athletics, who happen to be owned by Arnold Johnson, who own Yankee Stadium. He's not owning the Milwaukee Brewers right now. And Barstool Sports, I don't know what I got to say to you. Keep up with your cutting edge reporting with the guy that, can't drop enough F-bombs. But when it comes to reporting a story, I believe, Mad TV's reporting before I believe anything that Barstool Sports reports. Thanks for tuning in today. Be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m. right here on Periscope, Facebook Live, and available on demand on YouTube. If there's anything you missed, the replays will be available. YouTube video will be up within a couple hours. Big thanks to Kevin Tuve, the head scout for the Rockland Boulders, for joining the program. We got some other guests planning for this week. We got a former NBA star who'll be joining the program. A couple other people I rubbed elbows with at the baseball winter meetings in Orlando, Florida. So we'll be back with you tomorrow, 6 p.m. right here on Periscope, Facebook Live, and on demand on YouTube. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.
Rock over London, rock on Chicago. Mitsubishi, the word is getting around.